"You and that dog get out of my restaurant now," the manager shouted. The 70-year-old veteran silently embraced his service dog, his only companion. Nobody defended him. Nobody spoke up. He quietly left, his eyes heavy with unspoken sorrow. But just 2 hours later, dozens of Humvees and Marines flooded the parking lot, leaving the entire restaurant speechless. Think loyalty only exists in movies? Type loyalty if you believe some bonds can never be broken. Robert Hayes was a 70-year-old retired U.S. Marine who had served honorably in both Iraq and Afghanistan. His military bearing remained evident in his posture, despite the years that had passed since his service. The creases in his face told stories of desert suns and long nights on patrol, while his eyes, still sharp but somehow distant, had seen things most civilians could never comprehend. In 2008, during his final deployment, Hayes had survived an explosion near his base that left him with minor spinal damage and severe PTSD that manifested in debilitating anxiety attacks. The Department of Veterans Affairs had provided him with Duke, a trained emotional support service dog who had become his constant companion and lifeline during difficult moments. Duke was a German shepherd with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor, trained specifically to recognize the subtle signs of Hayes' anxiety attacks before they escalated. The dog wore a clearly marked service vest with official patches and identification, indicating his status as a legally recognized support animal. On a pleasant Wednesday evening, Hayes decided to treat himself to dinner at the Golden Plate, a popular family restaurant on the outskirts of town. He dressed carefully for the occasion in pressed khaki pants and a button-down shirt, with Duke walking obediently beside him, service vest prominently displayed. As they entered the restaurant, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Conversations paused, and several diners glanced their way with disapproving looks. Hayes was accustomed to curious stares, but the hostility in some of these gazes was unmistakable. The restaurant manager, a thin man with a permanent frown, approached them before they could even reach the hostess stand. "No dogs allowed in the dining area," he stated flatly, pointing to a small sign by the entrance. Hayes remained calm, reaching into his pocket to produce Duke's service animal certification card. "This is a certified service dog," he explained politely. "Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, he's legally permitted to accompany me in public establishments. I have his documentation right here." The manager barely glanced at the card before waving it away dismissively. "I don't care what kind of card you have. Other customers will be uncomfortable with an animal near their food." From a nearby table, a woman in expensive jewelry whispered loudly enough to be heard, "Why do these people think they're special?" "A dog is a dog." Her dining companion nodded in agreement. "Probably just another fake service animal. Everyone's got an emotional support something these days." Hayes didn't argue or raise his voice. Years of military discipline had taught him to pick his battles, and creating a scene would only trigger the anxiety he relied on Duke to help manage. "Perhaps we could sit on the patio then," he suggested quietly. "We wouldn't disturb anyone out there." The manager's lips thinned, but he reluctantly gestured toward the outdoor seating area. "Fine. Out there only." Hayes and Duke made their way to the empty patio, where a server begrudgingly showed them to a table in the farthest corner, away from any other patrons. Duke settled quietly under the table, touching his nose gently to Hayes' ankle, a subtle gesture of reassurance. 20 minutes passed without anyone returning to take their order or even bring water. Hayes watched through the window as servers attended to newly arrived guests inside, while studiously avoiding eye contact with him. The message was clear. They weren't welcome. Eventually, Hayes stood up, placed a small tip on the table as a silent apology for taking up space, and prepared to leave. As they walked out, a young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, why does that man look so sad?" the child asked innocently. The mother hesitated, then bent down to whisper, "Sometimes good people get treated badly, sweetheart." Hayes pretended not to hear as he and Duke walked toward the parking lot, the weight of rejection heavy on his shoulders. In that moment, he felt more alone than he ever had in the deserts of the Middle East. Hayes settled onto a bench outside the restaurant, Duke resting his head protectively on his master's knee. The dog's expressive eyes seemed to understand the rejection they just experienced. Hayes gently stroked Duke's head, finding comfort in the simple, unconditional bond they shared. "It's all right, boy," he murmured. "We've faced worse, haven't we?" A server from the restaurant emerged, her expression hard and unwelcoming. "Sir, I need to ask you to leave the patio area as well. We don't serve dogs, even out here." Hayes looked up, momentarily startled by this additional rejection. He had hoped they might at least be permitted to rest before finding somewhere else to eat. "We're just sitting here," he explained calmly. "We'll be on our way shortly." The server shifted uncomfortably but stood her ground. "Manager's orders. You need to leave restaurant property entirely." Hayes nodded slowly, struggling to his feet. His back pain, a constant reminder of the explosion that had changed his life, flared as he stood. Duke immediately pressed against his leg, providing the support that had become second nature to them both. As they walked away, Hayes's expression revealed not anger, but profound disappointment, as though he'd been denied not just a meal, but recognition of his very humanity. Unknown to Hayes, a young man at a nearby table had been observing the entire interaction. This observer, James Wilson, was himself a former Marine who had served under Hayes's command during a particularly harrowing tour in Afghanistan. Hayes didn't recognize his former subordinate. Wilson had been just one of countless young faces under his care during his long military career. Wilson discreetly captured video of Hayes and Duke being asked to leave. Without showing his own face, he posted the clip to his social media accounts with a simple caption. "This man risked his life to protect our freedoms. Today, he couldn't even get a seat at a restaurant." The video began accumulating views at an astonishing rate. Among those who saw it were members of the local Veterans Association and active duty Marines stationed at the nearby base. The Veterans Network, still strongly connected through bonds formed in combat, quickly identified Hayes from the footage. "That's Captain Hayes," one former Marine wrote in the comments. "He pulled 3 of us out of a burning vehicle outside Fallujah in 2007. Another added, "He led the rescue operation that saved my entire unit when we were pinned down. I wouldn't be alive to type this if not for him." Within the hour, an urgent call went out through unofficial channels. "Captain Hayes needs us. Golden Plate Restaurant. Who's available?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. 2 hours after Hayes and Duke had been turned away, the restaurant's tranquil evening was interrupted by the distinct rumble of military vehicles. A convoy of personal vehicles led by several Humvees pulled into the parking lot, disgorging approximately 30 Marines in full uniform. The restaurant manager rushed outside, his face contorted with alarm. "What is this? You can't just take over a private establishment." A Marine staff sergeant stepped forward, his bearing formal but his eyes conveying barely contained anger. "We're here for dinner, sir, with the man you refused to serve." The restaurant fell silent as patrons and staff alike stared through the windows at the assembling formation of Marines. Inside, those who had snickered at Hayes earlier now sat frozen, suddenly understanding the gravity of their casual cruelty. There are debts that can't be measured in dollars, only repaid with respect. If you believe gratitude is our duty to those who served, type loyalty below this video right now. The transformation was beginning. What had started as a simple act of discrimination was about to become a powerful lesson in respect, brotherhood, and the unbreakable bonds forged in service to country. The commanding officer of the Marine unit stepped forward, approaching Hayes with a formal salute. "Captain Hayes, sir, we would be honored if you and Duke would join us for dinner this evening." The Marines formed 2 precise lines, creating an honor guard path for Hayes and Duke to walk through. The discipline and respect in their formation spoke volumes. These were not merely colleagues coming to the aid of one of their own, but warriors acknowledging a battle-tested leader. Patrons who had previously laughed or turned away now sat in complete silence, their meals forgotten as they witnessed the profound respect being shown to the man they had so casually dismissed. Hayes stood momentarily stunned, his weathered face revealing emotional combat more challenging than any battlefield engagement. His eyes glistened with unspoken gratitude as Duke wagged his tail beside him, seemingly understanding the significance of the moment. I don't know what to say," Hayes managed, his voice thick with emotion. "No words needed, sir," the officer replied. "We take care of our own." Inside the restaurant, the Marines efficiently reorganized several tables to create a large communal dining area. Each Marine ordered and paid for their own meal. This was not charity but camaraderie, not a handout, but an acknowledgement of shared sacrifice. Hayes was seated at the center position, the place of honor. Duke settled beside him, now welcomed without question. The dog's presence, so recently deemed inappropriate, was now understood by everyone present as essential, not merely to Hayes's comfort, but to his dignity. A local reporter who happened to be dining at the restaurant that evening captured photographs of the impromptu gathering. By morning, the story had spread beyond their small community to regional and national news outlets. Marines rally around veteran after restaurant denies service dog entry. Within days, Hayes received thousands of letters, emails, and social media messages from across the country. Many came from fellow veterans. Others came from civilians moved by the display of solidarity. Several restaurant chains reached out with offers to host Hayes and other veterans for complimentary meals. A major pet food company pledged a year's supply of premium dog food for Duke. A veterans advocacy group presented Hayes with their Unwavering Resilience Award at a ceremony attended by hundreds. When interviewed about the incident, Hayes displayed the same humility and grace that had characterized his military leadership. "I harbor no ill will," he said quietly. "I only wish they understood that the freedom they enjoy today, to run their business as they see fit, was purchased with the sacrifice of service members and companions like Duke." James Wilson, the former Marine who had captured and shared the initial video, finally approached Hayes after the story gained national attention. "Captain Hay," he said, standing at attention, "you won't remember me, but I served under your command in Kandahar in 2006. You saved our entire unit when we were ambushed." Recognition dawned slowly on Hayes's face. "Wilson? James Wilson? The radio operator?" Wilson nodded, emotion evident in his expression. "You told us never to leave a man behind. I couldn't leave you behind either, sir." The moment of recognition bridged decades of silence and separation. Two men who had faced death together embraced, their shared history transcending the years between then and now. In a ceremony that few could have anticipated, Duke was formally presented with an honorary service medal by the local Marine Corps League detachment. The dog sat with almost human dignity as the medallion was attached to his service vest, becoming a living symbol of the unbreakable bond between warriors. The manager of the Golden Plate, facing intense community backlash and declining business, issued a public apology and announced mandatory staff training on service animal regulations and veterans issues. More significantly, he instituted a new policy. Active military personnel and veterans would receive a 25% discount, and service animals would always be welcome. "It shouldn't have taken this to make us do the right thing," the manager acknowledged in a statement. "Sometimes it takes being shown our own failings to grow as people and as a business." The incident that began with rejection had transformed into something more powerful, a community awakening to the quiet dignity of those who had served and the ongoing battles many veterans continued to fight long after leaving the battlefield. Each afternoon, Hayes and Duke could be found taking their daily walk through the local park. Duke now wore a small sign on his service vest that read, "I once saved a Marine. Now I save a soul." Local residents no longer turned away when they approached. Instead, they stopped to greet them, bowed their heads in respect, or simply offered a quiet "thank you for your service." Restaurant owners waved them in, insisted on paying for their meals, and made sure Duke had fresh water and a comfortable place to rest. Hayes accepted these gestures with the same grace he had shown when facing rejection. His smile, once rare, came more easily now. "I don't need much," he would say, when asked what more people could do for veterans like him. "Just the understanding that an old Marine and his loyal dog deserve a place in this world they helped keep safe." The story spread beyond their small town, inspiring other communities to examine how they treated their veterans. Schools began inviting Hayes and Duke to speak about service animals and the invisible wounds of war. Several restaurants donated a portion of their proceeds to service dog training programs for veterans with PTSD. On Veterans Day, the community held a special ceremony at the park where Hayes and Duke walked daily. They unveiled a small bronze plaque on a bench, their bench, engraved with words that captured the lesson everyone had learned. "Honor is not freely given. It is a debt owed to those who have given everything to protect our way of life." Hayes sat on that bench, Duke at his feet, as generations of service members, from World War II veterans to newly enlisted recruits, came to shake his hand. No words were needed. The respect in their eyes said everything. Respect isn't something you claim. It's something you earn through quiet sacrifice and unwavering loyalty. If you believe honor never goes out of style, subscribe to TT Hero Stories. TT Hero Stories, because some heroes never stop serving.